New York City is looking to usher in its youngest mayor in over 100 years, who's pledged to address the concerns of working-class voters for an affordable life in the Big Apple. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Wednesday, November 12th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Zohran Mamdani, the 34-year-old democratic socialist who won the latest mayoral election in New York City, has been making headlines in many ways. He's poised to become one of the youngest in over a century to hold the post of mayor in New York City. He'll also be the first Muslim mayor and the first New York City mayor to be born in Africa. For more, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German press agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, welcome back.
Very pleased to be here.
I also have Ruy Valdes with Spanish news agency EFE Spain, live on the line. Ruy, welcome.
Nice to be here, Sonny.
Right, Fabian, let's start here in the studio. Let's begin with the global media coverage of Mamdani's election victory. What has been the focus of the coverage here in South Korea and perhaps over in Europe?
Yeah, I found the coverage actually quite interesting. I think Mamdani is a figure that, as a psychologist, they would call it maybe an object of projection, because you can project a lot into this political figure, and the reporting often tells you more about who is reporting than the subject itself. What I mean by this is that among the left-leaning press, the coverage really differed quite a lot than compared with the conservative press. In South Korea, for example, the conservative press would be represented by Chosun Ilbo, for example. That would be a classic representative, and they were more skeptical towards him. I mean, they were skeptical about some of his ideas being a little bit like Soviet-style socialist. I mean, the accusation was not was always in the undertones a little bit. So they also questioned, can he, with his inexperience, can he really implement all his populist pledges? So there was really a lot of skepticism. On the other hand, the Hangul-dae, like a left-leaning paper here in South Korea, they were like praising him, that he's a populist in a positive sense, that he's listening to the people, that he's really having an ear to the street and basically takes care of the real need of the working class people. So you can see quite some difference. And in the European press, it's exactly the same. Maybe there's some special aspects to it. For example, in German media, especially in the conservative media, they questioned his, or they had a lot of doubts about his previous past of being very critical towards Israel. I mean, that's a very sensitive issue in Germany because of the dark past of Nazi Germany. So basically, Germans are very skeptical if someone is, for example, trying to boycott Israel, and that maybe we come to this aspect later. He's very critical to the government in Israel. And the left press in Europe is praising him as a messiah, really as a figure who could save this country. I mean, there's a lot of positive coverage. Why? I think because many journalists in Europe have a dislike for Trump, and Mamdani is seen as a hero that could challenge Trump.
Right, and staying with this, Ruy, what can you tell us about the coverage of Mamdani's election victory in Spanish-speaking countries?
Yes, actually, it was very interesting to listen to Fabian because the perspective, well, of course, many of the characteristics that of Mamdani that the Spanish language press is focusing are similar to what Fabian has mentioned, but there's also a part that I can understand what he says when from Europe, he might be not seen that extremist to the left, no? As a democratic socialist, he would share many ideologies or policies or proposals that you can compare in main countries in Europe. But for the US, this profile is a little bit more extreme, to put it in relative terms. And when it comes to Spanish media, the focus, of course, is not as much in that part, but it's more about the profile of this working class, pro-immigration personality that connected a lot with Latinos, with the Hispanic communities in the U.S. So many of the focus have been on that part, in the sense that through his policies, he was able to, let's try to separate first. When we talk about Donald Trump or Donald Trump administration, we are not talking about a strong capitalist right wing. They have many protectionist measures, as we know, with tariffs and so on and so forth. But when it comes to civil rights or human rights or these types of topics, he would be clearly conservative. While Mamdani has this progressive part of subsidies, of anti-discrimination or pro-immigration, but at the same time, it not necessarily has, let's say, a free market economy ideology, at least for the city of New York. Another part that the Spanish language press have been focusing is in his recent visit to Puerto Rico. He gave a speech in this event organized by Somos, which is a nonpartisan forum that participates New York and Latino leaders. And there he was able to link this famous slogan of Puerto Rico that in Spanish goes, Puerto Rico no se vende, which means Puerto Rico doesn't sell out, and put it to New York. He was also very, let's say, the press or people noticed Mamdani a lot because during his campaign, he exposed in his advertisements, many of them were in Spanish, or if you wanted to get information about his campaign, it was in Spanish. Of course, in a more or broader sense, Spanish-speaking media has always also covered his clash with Trump when Trump has made threats to arrest him if he takes out a video of ICE related to the raids, immigration raids, and to defund him. And Mamdani's reply that the president's threats are only threats and not the law. And there is a specific episode also in Latin America that Argentinian President Milei, after Mamdani won the election, he said that socialism has entered the U.S. via the East Coast. Of course, we know Milei, he's a self-proclaimed libertarian and has these ideas. So, well, that reaction was also widely covered from Spanish-speaking media.
Right, I see. And Fabian, before we progress any further, tell us a bit about who Zohran Mamdani is and a bit more about his pledges while on the campaign trail.
Yeah, happy to do so. He has a very interesting biography. He's born in Uganda, and he has actually Indian roots. So his parents are of Indian descent. He's Muslim. And I think his upbringing is quite interesting. As a child, then later he moved to New York, and his parents are quite some renowned intellectuals. His father is a professor. He also taught a couple of years at Columbia University. He also taught at a lot of African universities and research, like post-colonial studies. His mother is a very prestigious movie maker. So there was also a little bit the accusation that he's a so-called silver spoon socialist. Well, you make of that what you will, but he's definitely not from a working class background. He comes from a, I would say, slightly elitist background, but compared to other politicians, I would say it's also relatively down to earth. He studied Africa studies. He was actually, during his younger years, rapping. He was a rap artist, and I can only encourage viewers to maybe look that up on YouTube. You find some videos, actually some quite funny videos. And he also joined the BDS movement. That means boycott, divest, sanction, and that is a movement that basically, is against the Israeli government. So he was already from a young age very critical to Israel's policy, for example, in Gaza. His pledges are quite down to earth and simple. He has simple messages. He talks like a real human being, not like a typical politician. And his main concern is the affordability for average citizens in New York. New York has become a city where housing is extremely expensive. Also, like simple things like health insurance, etc., become unaffordable for many people. So he wants to have rent freezes, so basically making renting more affordable. He wants free kindergartens, free education, etc. Those things that critics say are very socialist in a negative way, but actually from a European perspective, maybe we can talk about that, are actually quite reasonable. And I think those pledges resonate for the people, because he was really actually known during his campaign to go out on the street, also go to areas where he's not necessarily popular, and listen to the people and basically take the messages from the people. He said that I'm not a president for my own agenda, I'm a president for you, so I serve the people. That's his message, and I think it's relatively credible.
Right. Ruy, what has the American media been highlighting, perhaps, as the reasons behind Mamdani's election victory?
Well, in a nutshell, they have mentioned that his triumph is equivalent to grassroots affordability revolt. Many mentioned that he took, well, not he took, but the same as Trump, but very similar outsider narrative. But as I mentioned before, this time is progressive, especially in topics like gender or immigration, etc., etc. One of the main keys, as Fabian was mentioning, was, yes, that he was able to connect with the youth energy, digital creativity, and set himself as different as the common politician. But mostly what the media is taking as one of the main reasons that his narrative or his proposals were so appealing was that he, in his message, affordability trumped all. This means this is very connected with his slogan that it was a city we can afford. So he made promises to reduce cost of living, cost of housing, and improve childcare, and also reduce crime and improve safety, of course. They say the message consistency was also important. He was a very good communicator and very clear on what he wants to get. It's quite interesting also, as we were talking, how disconnected a lot with the working class, and also in a city like New York, where it's multicultural, this new image really contrasts the image that Donald Trump has as a president right now, no? So, so one thing he proves, or the media is saying he proves, is, again, that experience doesn't matter that much for the voters. Of course, Mamdani will face many challenges as he's the youngest mayor ever and the first Muslim mayor in New York. But at the same time, it seems that people are desperate to look for someone new. And even though Trump played this card, when he became a president as an outsider, he's almost 80 years old, the previous president was even older than him. So for many, Mamdani is representing this new wave, this new generation of politicians that found new ways to connect to the youth, which was a big chunk of their voters, and also to a new reality, or I don't want to, let's use another word, maybe it's not a new reality, but the people that feel that are getting left out with this new administration in the U.S., this Republican administration, in the sense that, as we can see in the results of the voting, one of the other main news is that Republicans are losing a lot of the Hispanic votes and Latino vote, which was very important for them in the latest elections. And this happened all across in the victories of the recent victories of the Democrats. So yes, what they are saying is that Mamdani found a way to become appealing for these ethnic groups that supported, historically, many of them, or a big part of them, supported the Republicans. So he's seen as a window of hope to the Democrats, and also it remains to be seen if the Democrats will adopt this new style or more modernized or updated style of politics that Mamdani is showing.
Right, that is something up for debate, of course. Fabian, Mamdani has called himself a democratic socialist. For the sake of clarity, do tell us a bit about the definition for democratic socialism, and what does New York City's election of Mamdani tell us about the city's priorities moving forward?
Yeah, so the term democratic socialist might evoke a lot of negative images, especially in the US. You have to see it in the context of the country. The US has a very strong anti-communist history, and when the average person thinks that someone calls himself a socialist, then he or she would think about North Korea, China, Soviet Union. And I think it's important to really clarify what the term means, because socialism, does not equal socialism. There's really a lot of differences, and it gets very complicated with all those autocratic regimes that I just mentioned. China, for example, in some ways, there's a lot of Manchester, like really hardcore capitalism. And if you want to start an independent labor union, you go to jail. On the other hand, you have a socialist or like a Leninist-style communist party who governs this country. So does socialism apply to this country? Maybe not, but what democratic socialist means has nothing to do with all those autocratic regimes. Democratic socialism is committed to a free society, a free system, but states that capitalism alone cannot be the answer, and also that the free market has to be regulated to a certain degree. For example, when it comes to housing, healthcare, education, public transport, those kind of things. So capitalism needs some regulation. I think that's one of the arguments that many democratic socialists make. Well, in the context of the US, it's very obvious that you have the strongest economy in the world, but that has obviously a lot of economic problems, especially the high inequality. But very fundamental needs are quite unaffordable now. Also, as someone who lives in South Korea, it's quite obvious with the Americans that I talk to who live here in South Korea. Often when you ask why they move here, one of the things that they really like about South Korea is that it has affordable healthcare, for example. It has public safety is good. The subway system is very good. All those things that actually lack in the US. Why? I think because it is quite hardcore capitalist in some ways. At least from the perspective of a democratic socialist, that would make sense. Mamdani makes pledges that basically wants to make living more affordable, wants to tackle the power of the tech billionaires. It wants to have a more even distribution of wealth between, the rich and the lesser privileged people. Maybe you might think about Bernie Sanders. I think he was also a kind of democratic socialist. He, in 2016, he almost won the vote among the Democratic Party for the presidential election. In the end, Hillary Clinton won it, and she lost to Trump during his first term. Many people say that actually someone like Bernie Sanders might have had a chance against Trump during his first term, because Bernie Sanders was also someone who, took the need of the people and basically addressed it. Because that was a lot of criticism in the last years, that the Democratic Party became quite elitist and lost the connection to its roots. That they didn't really know much what the working class was dealing about in their everyday life. What are their problems? And I think in New York, all those problems that I just mentioned are really much more extreme than in most other cities, because you have to be really rich to afford a decent house. It is really quite an expensive city, and then you can ask the question, okay, even you earn a lot, but actually your living standards might be lower than in other areas that are actually less developed economically. And I think those are the problems that a democratic socialist wants to tackle.
Right, and Bernie Sanders, of course, is one of the few Democrats who's openly endorsed Mamdani, of course, and congratulated him on his election victory. Now, Ruy, our Fabian here in the studio talked about how the Americans he came across here in South Korea have spoken about the affordable health care here in South Korea is one reason why they live here. Dispute over health care between Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. have partly led to the shutdown that we saw the federal government, the longest one in U.S. history, of course. Could you tell us a bit more about that shutdown and the prospects going forward?
Yes, the record-long shutdown that began in October is near an end after the U.S. Senate passed a bipartisan bill, 60-40 in the Senate vote. I'm gonna try not to get too technical with my answer because, well, this has a lot of details that might be, well, for another show. But in general, what we have as the core is that, yeah, there's hope that this shutdown finally is gonna end. But still, what the Democrats were asking, which was to preserve ACA health insurance subsidy extensions, it was only as a final result of this signature of this bill, it's only as a promised revision, but it's not a win. What this means is that this issue, the health insurance subsidy extensions, will be revised again by the end of the year. So even though the shutdown might end, this does not mean that the Democrats will get away with this demand that they have that they had in terms of health insurance subsidies. Still, as we saw all over the news, this shutdown created a stop that sorry, I just heard something in the thing. That created like furloughs and unpaid work of 1.4 million federal workers stopped without paying, while some institutions were still running in Social Security, Medicare checks, and law enforcement. There was this big threat that air traffic controllers were working unpaid. So this caused flight delays, some cancellations, and there was even the fear that there was going to be a massive shutdown of flights as a result of these shutdowns. In terms of the economic impact, the analysts estimate around 0.1, 0.2 percentage points of GDP loss per week. And this, as I mentioned, started since October. So in a nutshell, there's hope for this to end. It still needs to be passed by the House and signed by President Donald Trump. And the main issue that the Democrats were asking was not resolved.
Right, but the U.S. House, of course, is set to vote on whether to open the government again on Wednesday. Right, Ruy, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you very much.
Fabian, here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
All right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.